Greetings all, this is Management 430, Human Resource Management, and this is the beginning of our competency module on employee relations, and very specifically we start with the concept of motivation. Motivation is fundamentally how people decide, whether or not they want to put forth the effort. If you remember in the very first competency module, we talked about how human beings are the only asset or the only resource that an organization uses that has a mind of its own. And motivation is the tool that we can use to help influence people's behaviors. And we do this because we want to influence them to follow the policies and practices that we have in place. We want to make sure we provide them with adequate rewards, and we want to make sure they have the ability to do the things that they need to do. So, without further ado, we will talk about all the different motivation theories out there. Pay can be a very important motivator, and I would argue, though, that we put probably more emphasis on pay than we should. And what I mean by that is pay is important. And when we treat people fairly and we reward them fairly, then there usually isn't any issue. Then it gives us an opportunity to utilize intrinsic motivators like autonomy and responsibility and things like that that really excite people to be creative and to think outside the box. But we'll start with basic pay and pay as a motivator because it's an important extrinsic reward. And if organizations do not do a good job of managing extrinsic rewards, they're going to have a very difficult time getting people to do the work of the organization at the level that they want and the way that they want that to be done. So pay is basically broken down into two different types of motivators. One is what we call the traditional pay, the salary, the check that we get every week. There's a guarantee because we are on a salary that we know what our paycheck will be, and what we want to recognize is that this is a consistent way that we will get paid. So, and I know I will consistently get the same amount of money, so I know that's dependable and it's reliable, and I can be happy knowing I have my base pay. Now, if we want people to go above and beyond and to do really well in terms of their performance, we want to reinforce good behaviors and good performance levels. Then not only do we do our base pay, but we also will do pay for performance. Because even if someone is a mediocre performer, like they do the minimum, but they don't do more than that, they're still going to get their paycheck. But when you have an additional pay for performance program in your system, then that's a different story, because now what that does is allows for people to get rewarded for working harder and being more productive and doing more than the person sitting next to them. And that is a good tool for us to be able to increase performance at a certain level. So pay, as I said, the motivating part of pay, we'll get into the basic rules of compensation later on, but pay as a motivator is a really important one because it's about the extrinsic motivation that we need. Motivation has two parts to it. It's the force, the psychological force behind something. It's like what is driving us to do something. And then what we want to do is make sure that we have a direction in which that force is moving. So if I want people to behave in a particular way and to do a certain thing in the job, not only do I have to tell them that they need to do it and explain to them why it's important and show them that this is what needs to be done. So that becomes the force, the direction, the thing that they need to do. And then we use pay for performance to direct them, to get them to do the thing that we want to do. So our pay has to have duration, right? We want them to do it for a certain period of time, a certain level of effort that we want them to do, the types of behaviors that we want them to demonstrate, and then the direction is, where we want them to head. So there's force that's always going to be there. It could be force towards it. It could be force against it. but the force will always be there. It's the direction, form, effort, and duration that decides in what direction it's actually going to happen, and how much in depth that's going to be. And as I've already implied, we've got two different kinds of motivation. We've got extrinsic motivation, for which pay and pay for performance is a great example of an extrinsic motivator. And then we have intrinsic motivators. And intrinsic motivators are the things within ourselves that drive us to have a good work ethic or to be conscientious. The things that drive us to do better, things like autonomy, mastery, being able to learn something and to learn it for the sake of learning, and then purpose, knowing that I have a purpose behind what I do, that I'm not just doing this in a vacuum, that there's a reason why I have to do this, and there's a reason why I have to do it in a certain way. And once I understand the purpose, that in and of itself will also drive me to behave in a particular way. So to get into extrinsic motivation in a little bit more depth, it's called extrinsic because it's outside of me. It's outside of my head. It's outside my body. It's outside of what's in my heart, what motivates me internally. So it's something that's outside of me. It can be pay, compensation, awards, recognition. All of these things are really great extrinsic rewards because it comes from an external source and it is provided to me as a reward or as an item that will encourage me to continue to put the force behind what I'm doing and to do it in the right direction, to increase performance or to decrease accidents, whatever that might be. Obviously, the power of pay varies from place to place, and when pay is poor, that automatically puts us at poor motivation to get work done, and it'll be a struggle for people to perform. Now, I'm not talking about a situation, as we talked about in the last competency module on strategic thinking, I'm not talking about companies like Walmart that are low-cost providers, because Walmart is going to pay a reasonable wage. It's just that they're not going to pay the top dollars, but they are going to pay people with a certain expectation of pay and what that's going to be. And people go into the job knowing that. It's different if you have a company that's, selling products at really high prices and then they're paying people well below the market rate. Even if Walmart did that, that would not be a healthy example of low pay. And so higher levels of pay, when we are treating people fairly, are great, even if they're just average levels of pay. As long as people feel like it's being done fairly and they go in knowing what they're going to get and getting what they were told they were going to get, that can make a big difference for people. So extrinsic motivation is basically anything that comes from the outside. It could be, my boss saying, you did a great job, because it's a recognition, it's an award for and a recognition for a level of performance, even if it doesn't come with more pay. It's a public acknowledgement from somebody from outside saying I did a good job. And then any kind of pay, whether it's our base pay that should consistently motivate us, and then the pay for performance that pushes us to do more. These are the things that we obviously want to understand. What motivates people varies from person to person. Obviously, what motivates you is not going to motivate me. So we have to understand that there's not a one-size-fits-all approach to motivating or setting up a motivational situation. The other thing that's really important for you to know is I can't motivate you. You motivate yourself. I can create the situation, the context, the extrinsic rewards will be there, but you have to make the decision, assessing your context, whether or not that makes sense, whether or not it matters to you, and whether or not you're going to work hard given those rewards. But the things that motivate me aren't going to be the things that motivate you, and we have to recognize that. Yes, pay is important, and we want to make sure that pay is done fairly, but beyond that, there are a lot of different things that excite people And what excites you doesn't excite me. What's going to drive me is not going to drive you. It might be, and we do have some consistency in things that we know will generally get people excited about work. But I also need to know specifically what you need versus what I need, and what this employee needs versus what that employee needs. And when I recognize what I need to do to help create that context of motivation for each of those employees, my job as a manager is to know that person and know what excites them, and to know the other person and know that something else might excite them differently, and to do that accordingly. Intrinsic reward, as I said, is not external to me. It's internal to me. It's things that I find meaningful or challenging or enjoyable, and what I like to do, and what excites me inside of me, the thing that drives me personally without interference from anybody outside of me. It's like, I want to do this because I really love doing this and it matters to me. So we want something that is meaningful. We want to create meaning. We want to make sure people feel challenged. We want to make sure they're enjoying what they do. And when we ignore intrinsic motivation, all we're going to end up with is compliance. Um, there is a video that you will be watching for this class. It has to do with Daniel Pink talking about motivation theories and what motivates people, and how motivation links to engagement. And if we set up jobs where people might get paid fair, but they're not doing meaningful, challenging work, and it's boring to them, their intrinsic motivation will be low. And if we ignore intrinsic motivation, what Daniel Pink argues is we will not be able to have creative problem solving. In 21st century problems, he calls them, where if we are only going to worry about pay and we ignore intrinsic motivation, people are not going to rise to the occasion to solve the ambiguous problems that are out there that we need to be paying attention to. And again, like extrinsic motivation, what excites me and what motivates me and what's meaningful for me is different than what excites and motivates and is meaningful for you. And as a supervisor, as a manager, I need to know my employees and get to know the things that excite them. If I have an employee that loves to go to conferences and learns and brings that information back, I want to funnel money towards them to be able to do that. If I have another employee that likes to have time off, I'm going to find ways to make sure that they aren't being charged overtime and being required to do overtime rather, and that they get to have the time off that they want. And I work with each of them to make sure that I am providing a reward system or a motivational system in place that's going to work for them. And it's one of the reasons why, as we will talk about compensation later, that we have what we call flexible benefits plans, where I can decide what benefits I want and what benefits I don't want. And if these are benefits that matter to me, I will engage in those behaviors that excite me, and you can get a benefits plan that excites you, right? So, because everybody's needs are really different in terms of the benefits that they want as well. So that variance is big, and that variance in what motivates and excites and is meaningful for people is what dictates all sorts of different factors, including pay for performance programs and benefits programs and all those kinds of things. So we should pay attention to that. I like the way this textbook talks about the relationship between extrinsic and intrinsic motivation. Everybody has a level of intrinsic motivation, but what we need, right, is to have extrinsic motivation that will enhance that. So I am not going to put forth a lot of effort if my intrinsic motivation is low. If it's high, I will work harder regardless of extrinsic motivation. But if I have really good pay and benefits and pay for performance, and I get rewarded for being a good performer, that's going to take and enhance my intrinsic motivation and bump it up and next level, right? So I'm much more likely to do more. But when we don't have good, fair extrinsic motivation, it really undermines intrinsic motivation. And people aren't going to want to put the effort forth with their intrinsic motivation to get things done. So we need both. We need attention to both. Companies that only look at one versus the other are cutting off their nose to spite their face, right?